My mother has been shaming me since I got married, and now she's trying to marry off my minor daughters. I can't believe I ever had to make a post about my mother, but here we are. I'm a 45-year-old woman and my mother is 71. We've always had a difficult relationship. My mother was an old-school, traditional wife. She was a homemaker, never worked outside the house, and had far more kids than I think is healthy. She had 7 daughters and 6 sons. Originally from Guatemala, she moved to the U.S. at 14, married my father, and raised her family here while trying to instill old-school values in us. She failed miserably. Most of my siblings have distanced themselves from her as much as possible. Sadly, 2 of them passed away. I'm the only one who stayed nearby to take care of our parents. Since my dad passed away, I've been covering my mother's bills so she can live comfortably. She has always been a dramatic headache, especially when it comes to my marriage. She constantly babied my husband and took his side in everything. I originally wanted just 1 child, and my husband agreed before we got married. But after we tied the knot, he pushed for as many kids as possible. My mother even helped him mess with my birth control, which led to my youngest daughter being born. I don't regret my daughter, but after that, I secretly got my tubes tied. My mother constantly berated me for being faulty because I only had 2 children, and she never let me forget that I got married too old, at 22. She married at 16. My husband was 49 when he died in a car crash recently. We had 2 daughters together, ages 14 and 16, but he was also having an affair with a 24-year-old woman who died in the crash. Together, they had twin boys earlier this year, who thankfully survived. My daughters were the first to find out about the affair. Their father took them to the hospital to meet the babies and told them to keep it a secret from me. They didn't, and once he found out, he became abusive toward them and me. We were in the middle of a divorce when he passed away. When the affair was exposed, my mother blamed me. She said it was because I was a working woman who didn't please her husband, that I didn't give him enough kids, and that I wasn't pretty anymore. Now, I'm not saying I'm super attractive, but I take care of myself, and I think I look good for my age. Still, in her eyes, I wasn't good enough, and my husband needed someone closer in age to our daughters than to him. She also got furious when I refused to adopt my husband's affair children. Her latest insanity? She's now trying to find husbands for my daughters, especially my oldest. This all started this week when my eldest came out to us. I already had an idea, and I was so proud of her for feeling safe enough to tell me and her sister, despite the chaos we're going through. But then she decided to tell my mother. My mother ended the call immediately. After that, she started bombarding me with links to conversion camps, so-called psychologists who claim being LGBTQ is a sickness, complete nonsense in my opinion, and even political articles. She even suggested an exorcism. I told her to stop or I would cut off all contact between her and my in-laws. My mother called me soon after, saying she had found husband prospects for my daughters, my high school-age daughters. To say I was furious is an understatement. She even gave some of these men my daughters' phone numbers. We're all getting new numbers tomorrow, and my daughters have set their social media to private. I don't know what part of her brain is broken, but I had the girls block her on everything. I'm also cutting off all financial support for her. I know I need to call the cops. I just never thought I'd have to report my own mother. And this is barely 2 weeks after I had to cut off my in-laws. I'm just exhausted. And before anyone assumes this is a Hispanic culture thing, it's not. My aunts are incredible women, most of them homemakers, and they're actually supporting me in cutting off my mother and calling the authorities. They even suggested that my daughters and I move closer to them in another state. This is just my mother being completely unhinged. Small update. We went to the police today and they took everything very seriously. The officer we spoke to was incredible and immediately helped my lawyer file for a temporary restraining order. We should get it within a month, and after that, we'll work on making it permanent. The officer also offered to check in on us daily, and the school has been notified. One of my brothers is moving in with us for now to help out. We can't just up and leave yet since I still have a job and my girls are in school, but for now we're safe. The girls have new phone numbers. Update. Some good news. Come November 2024, my mother will be completely cut off financially. There's also an investigation into what she tried to do to my daughters, and an old case involving a family matter has been reopened. Because of the charges, we might be able to fast-track the restraining order since minors are involved. Fingers crossed. The order will also prevent certain in-laws from contacting me. On another note, after talking to my daughters, we all agree that we don't like our house anymore. It's painful because it was my childhood home, a gift from my dad, but the reality is there's too much bad energy here. My daughters feel uncomfortable being so close to their grandparents, and my brother, who has moved in, is bluntly telling me the house isn't worth the stress. So, as hard as it is, I'm planning to renovate and either sell or rent it out. It's a massive house, 9 bedrooms, way too much space for us. I'd be happy with a smaller place where my daughters each have their own room and I have an office. My brother will be staying with us after we move. Not sure if it's permanent, but he's a huge support for my eldest daughter. He came out as gay almost 30 years ago, so he has way more knowledge about LGBTQ plus resources than I do. He's been amazing in helping her navigate everything after my mother's stunt. My youngest is also doing better. She's back to talking normally and seems less afraid to go out. She's even excited about house hunting with me. She wants the perfect yard, so we'll see what we can find. My job has also offered me a transfer out of state or even an international one, though that's not likely. A fresh start might be exactly what we need. As of November, I'm officially done acknowledging my mother. As far as I'm concerned, my parents both died when my father passed away. Update 2, just a small update. We're doing okay. I still can't share many details, but we finally have a court date for the restraining order. It took longer than expected, but things have been mostly quiet. I'll update when I can. Parents won't let me, M27. Move out of the house. I have an issue with my parents being really unsupportive about me moving out. My mom especially insists that I stay in the same city as her. Otherwise, she won't accept it. I recently got an offer to see an apartment I really liked. But when I told my parents and sister about it, they spent the entire time nagging about one single issue. The apartment doesn't have an elevator. My unit would be on the 4th floor, but that's really not a problem for me. When I asked them for actual feedback about the apartment itself, they kept up the negativity, but eventually admitted it was a good place. Fast forward 4 hours after visiting, and my mom had a complete meltdown. She tried to emotionally manipulate me into staying at her house, saying that she would drink poison or run in front of a car to end her life. It's 3:18 a.m. as I'm writing this, and my mind is completely messed up. I can't sleep, I can't even drink water, and my head is spinning over this apartment. It's in an amazing city with so many necessities close by. The highway is just 3 minutes away. The central station, a shopping center, everything I need. It feels like a dream come true apartment. But my mom is mentally and emotionally breaking me down. She doesn't even realize that her behavior is making me want to leave even more. After the meltdown, she ended it by saying that if I leave the house, she will only have 3 kids, meaning she won't recognize me as her son anymore. That pushed me over the edge. I got mad, left the living room, grabbed my jeans and car keys, and went outside to go for a drive. She followed me outside, crying and wheezing hysterically, begging me not to go. We sat in my car, and once again, I ended up giving in to her emotional abuse. I let her manipulate me into staying. We went back inside, and we all watched a movie together as a family, but my mind wasn't in the right space. Even now, while typing this, I have chest pain and my heart is racing. While we were in the car, she told me that she's afraid of my dad and feels like she needs me close by to protect her. As if the city I want to move to isn't only 10 minutes away by car and 20 minutes by train. I feel like I'm in a prison. She never wants me to leave, even if I get married. I have a girlfriend, and I want to start a life with her. I want to grow as a person, not be stuck in this house forever. My room is terrible, and I feel like I'm chained down, with my mom dragging me further and further into a pit. I need advice because my whole family's against me. One important thing to mention, I come from a Muslim household, so that adds another layer to this. But at this point, I just don't want to be here anymore. I don't even want to live anymore. My daughter's father sent a priest to harass me. I had no intention of making another post, but today absolutely took the cake. For those who don't know, my daughter, 6 years old, was born from a one-night stand with Jeff. We were never romantically involved. It was simply a one-time thing. We used contraceptives, but they failed. It happens. A few months ago, Jeff completely lost it and tried to convince me to let my daughter live with him so she could serve as a replacement for his wife, who had recently lost their infant daughter. I refused, and now we're dealing with some legal issues. Now for today. Thankfully, I didn't have to deal with Jeff directly this time. Instead, he sent a priest to harass me at work. To be clear, I am completely detached from religion. I'm not an atheist, but I don't like the idea of the Catholic Church, which is the leading religion in my home country. I still respect it, and most of my family is Catholic, so I have a distant but respectful attitude toward church officials. Today, while I was handling some paperwork, I got a call from my secretary saying that a priest was asking for me. I didn't have any meetings scheduled, but since we often get visits from clergy requesting donations or participation in events, I figured that was the case. I told her to let him in. At first, everything seemed normal. Polite greetings, a handshake, small talk. Then the priest suddenly started talking about how it had come to his attention that I was a single mother and apparently lived a life of debauchery and hate. His words, not mine. I was caught off guard, but calmly confirmed that, yes, I am a single mother. However, I had no idea what he meant by debauchery and hate. That's when he launched into a speech about how he knew my daughter was not allowed to spend time with her father, and how instead of living a godly life, I was supposedly sleeping around with men. He claimed he was deeply concerned and thought it would be best for my daughter to live with a proper family rather than witness me selling myself. To say I was angry would be an understatement. However, since I was at work, I kept things civil. I had no intention of screaming at a religious man in my office. I simply told him that my daughter was happy and safe with me, that my personal life was none of his concern, and that I had no intention of sending her to another household. I then told him that if he had nothing else to say, he should probably leave since I had work to do. That's when he finally revealed his true purpose. He told me that he didn't believe my daughter could be truly happy with me, but that her father was a well-respected man in his church and would raise her to be a proper Christian lady. At that, I couldn't help but laugh. I simply said no. I once again told him to leave, and if he didn't, I would call security. As he walked out, he told me he would try to speak to me again when I'm not being hysterical. I immediately informed my secretary and security not to allow him into my office again. I also called my lawyer. While I don't have an audio recording, there is security footage of him walking into my office. Thank you again to everyone who sent well wishes in my previous post. We are still working on moving, but my daughter is loving school. We still have a temporary restraining order against Jeff and his wife, and school officials are aware of the situation. Small update. I had a conversation with our local bishop. This priest was, in fact, a real one, but the bishop assured me that I won't hear from him again. He was very apologetic, and I am satisfied with how our discussion went. Entitled parents tried to destroy my dream because of their own grudges. Hey guys, sorry if anything is weird. This is my first story and I'm on mobile. I don't know if this fits here, but it definitely fits the theme. I was watching the legendary Yugos owner and realized that my dad and stepmom are completely stuck up their own backsides. Context. I grew up in a house with a twin, an older sister, and a younger brother. As the second twin, I was often ignored by my family and treated like the odd one out. I went through a lot of trauma, including years of verbal and physical abuse from both my twin and my dad. This left me struggling with anxiety, depression, and self-esteem issues. Recently, everything built up so much that I tried to end my own life, but that's not the focus of the story. Now, on to the story. In May 2024, I was in my senior year of high school and part of JROTC, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. I joined because I wanted to prepare myself for the military, specifically the Marines. I had been working with Marine recruiters, discussing MOS options and other plans. At 18, I wanted my parents to be aware of my decision. The recruiters also encouraged me to involve them, so I texted my dad to let him know. Now, here's where things went downhill. My dad is ex-Army and my stepmom is ex-Navy. For some reason, they both absolutely despise the Marines. When I told my dad about my interest, he completely lost it. They both stormed into my room, yelling and cursing at me, demanding that I hand over my phone because I had been speaking with Marine recruiters. I was terrified by their anger and insults, so I complied. They went through my phone, which actually belonged to my biological mom, and without asking either of us, factory reset it. But they didn't stop there. My dad then called my JROTC instructors, demanding that they prevent me from speaking to the Marines ever again. He even contacted the recruiters, trying to sabotage my future by telling them to lie about me having autism or asthma to get me disqualified. Thankfully, the recruiters didn't listen. The next day, my dad and stepmom took things even further. They made up lies about my girlfriend at the time, trying to force me to break up with her. Then they confiscated all my electronics, my gaming computer, my laptop, and even my school Chromebook. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, they contacted my JROTC instructors again, demanding that the Marines not be allowed to talk to me or even come near me. But one of my instructors, realizing that I was 18 and legally an adult, pulled me aside and told me that my parents had absolutely no legal grounds to stop me. That was the moment I knew I had to stand my ground. The stress of being grounded, isolated, and verbally abused by them for the next 2 weeks made my life unbearable. I had mental breakdowns, panic attacks, and couldn't focus in class. They wanted to force me into the Army or Navy, but I refused to give up on my dream. So I made my move. One day while my stepmom was out picking up my little brother, I stole my phone back. I grabbed what I needed and left. Of course, my dad completely freaked out. He kept texting me, demanding that I come back home so we could have a rational talk about why my decision was foolish. But I ignored him. I kept moving forward. It wasn't easy living so far from my school, 90 minutes away, and dealing with my dad's constant calls and texts. But I stuck with my decision. Eventually, I graduated, went to recruit training, and, unfortunately, got medically discharged. Even though things didn't go exactly as planned, I still feel proud of myself for standing up to them and making my own choices. I know it might have seemed reckless to join the Marines while dealing with trauma and a fear of yelling, but I thought it would help me grow.